What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a film that was released, I believe, in February of this year, and it recently became available on VOD. And this was a movie that I saw it come to AMC, but I hadn't seen a trailer for it, and it didn't really pique my interest right away. But after reading some reviews of it and some initial reactions, I thought that even though I didn't think this movie was going to be perfect, that it seemed like it could be a charming comedy with a lot of heart. And so I jumped into this knowing virtually nothing about it other than the base level premise. And the movie I'm going to be discussing with you today is Scrambled. Scrambled is directed by and stars Leah McKendrick. When a doctor visit reveals her fertility may be in jeopardy, 30-something Nellie Robinson stares down the barrel of a future without options and decides to freeze her eggs. So, as I said, I did not know a whole lot about this movie before I went into it. I hadn't even seen a trailer. I just read a brief description of the film and went in and watched it blindly, and I found this movie to be incredibly irritating. I did not like this movie at all, and it's really a shame because I felt like the premise was really interesting and it had a lot of potential. But unfortunately, the humor is so forced. The structure of the film is an absolute mess, and I'm going to talk about it in detail when I break the movie down. At the beginning of the film, we're introduced to Nellie, played by Leah McKendrick. She is at a friend's wedding, and her friend is about to get married, and she's having a complete meltdown, and the two of them have this conversation, and we get to see the events that happen at the wedding, and there's a couple comedic sequences early on. And shortly after, we see these scenes where Nellie is eating dinner with her parents and her brother, and we're learning a little bit more about her life. It's been a long time since she's had a steady relationship, and all of her friends are getting married and all of her friends are having children, and her father has this conversation with her where he's like heavily pressuring her about having kids, and she says, I wasn't ready to have kids, but he says, you're getting older and you might not have the opportunity, and she gets up in her head about it. And so she decides to go to a fertility doctor who says, you might be getting close to on the brink where it will be harder for you to have children. And so she decides to go through the process of IVF, where she's going to have her eggs frozen so that when she wants to have a baby, that it will be significantly easier for her to do so. And throughout the film, she wants to try to see if she can find someone to start dating or a potential partner. And so the film is her going back through a lot of her exes, seeing where relationships went wrong, while also going through this incredibly difficult process of freezing her eggs. So as I said, I thought the premise for this movie was really interesting, but the problem with this movie is it lacks any sort of heart or authenticity. All of the drama and emotion in this film feels so incredibly forced in a way that's just unappealing after about the first 25 minutes. The lead actress, Leah McKendrick, who is also the director, I think her direction of this film is fine. It's shot perfectly fine. Like it's not, the quality of the filmmaking isn't bad. But the problem is even her performance is fine, but her character is incredibly uninteresting and unlikable. It's very hard to root for someone who in the first 15 minutes of the movie you find to be the most insufferable person in the world. And even like in her interactions with her friends and the way that she's acting, it's just really hard to kind of get on board to any of the dramatic elements that come in the third act of the film. Another big problem with this movie is it doesn't understand its tone. For about the first hour of the film, it tries to be this blatant, over-the-top comedy that introduces this concept that you have a feeling that something dramatic is going to come towards the end. And there's a couple sequences in the last 30 minutes that just feel like they're shoved in there to get you to feel something other than the attempted humor from the first hour of the film. And it's shot in a way, I saw someone on Letterboxd say this and I found it so funny. They compared it to Scott Pilgrim, where she's like going through all of her old exes and like title cards of the names she's come up with for her exes show up, and it just misses every time because earlier on in the film it doesn't feel like the movie is going to go in that direction, and then when you think, oh, this is this over the top like heading, this is going to get really ridiculous and absurdly funny, the humor is like really cringe millennial humor that's like a nod at certain references or like jokes that feel really forced in a way that's so unsatisfying. And like I said, the forced drama in the third act, this is a movie obviously dealing dealing with a person who feels very lost in their life and is trying to settle down, but also it feels like a lot of the pressure is coming from her family and less from herself. And so that struggle feels a little bit inauthentic. Her dad is an absolutely horrible human being, and the entire movie he just says this really off-color stuff, and you're just like, why do you want anything to do with this person? He's just genuinely awful and terrible, and it's like, why do you keep putting yourself in a situation where he makes you feel bad for living your life the way that you want to live it? And the entire time I was watching this movie, I kept thinking of another film which isn't exactly the same premise, but it's both surrounding pregnancy, which is the A24 produced film Obvious Child starring Jenny Slate, which obviously is very different subject matter wise, where in this film this person is trying to preserve their eggs so that when they want to have a child they can, and in Obvious Child Jenny Slate's character wants to have an abortion because she has this surprise pregnancy. But it's two films surrounding the idea of pregnancy and the forced expectations that people have on women about childbearing. But the difference between the two films is that in Obvious Child, Jenny Slate's character starts off very similarly to the character in this film, where she is kind of off-putting in moments and not necessarily the most likable character, but her character goes through a change. She starts one way, learns things, grows as a person, and does something different at the end of the movie. And we as an audience are watching her along her journey, going through this very difficult situation and this decision that she has to make, learning with her and growing with her as a character. Where in this film, I felt like the character was the exact same person at the end of the film that she was at the beginning of the film. She has a couple of little character moments, but like, honestly, at the end, I just felt so unsatisfied by the material. And this is a film that could have packed a really intense emotional punch, but there's virtually no drama in the first hour of the film that justifies the drama that comes up in the last 30 minutes of the movie. It's like, pick a tone, or if you're going to balance a tone, introduce elements throughout the film that push and pull you as a viewer so that by the end of the movie, it feels like a totally satisfying and cohesive piece instead of just a complete narrative mess. And honestly, I don't have a lot more to say about this movie. I did like the soundtrack. Samia, who is one of my favorite artists, has a song in this movie. Chapel Roan, who is an absolutely incredible artist, has a song in this movie. I really enjoyed the soundtrack, but aside from that, I just kept trying to find something to be invested in this movie. I had a hard time grabbing onto anything to really be left with any sort of message, and that's upsetting because I do feel like when it comes to pregnancy and films about pregnancy, there is such a weird expectation placed on women, especially from their family, as to like, you need to have a baby here or you need to carry a child here because of how women have been perceived throughout history as being child bearers or caregivers, or any and all of those stereotypes that have been put on women for years, where some women don't want to have children and some women don't want to feel like they have to be pressured into having kids by the time they're 25. And so I think that it's a subject that is really thought-provoking and moving, and that if a movie was made correctly, could truly impact a lot of women who have feelings about this. And honestly, it was just a huge letdown, so much wasted potential, and I would completely skip this one. So have you seen Scrambled? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was terrible. I really don't have a lot of positive things to say, and that's unfortunate because I thought the concept was really great. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.